Excuse me, can I just get by you here? Oh, sorry, was that your foot? Pardon me. Wow, they must have started church early today.
Kevin, you're 30 minutes late.
I'm sorry, hon, but rounds went on forever this morning.
Usually does.
I couldn't get out of there, but I'm here now. And hey, just in time to hear Randy.
Oh, hey, speaking of time, my mom was wondering that when you become a third year, if you could possibly have just a little bit more time to help out with wedding plans.
I'm sorry, hon. I wish I could. I really do. But each year of residency gets harder. I have more things to do, not less. I was talking with my senior resident. She said, yeah, the third year is tough, but it's the fourth year, hands down, is the hardest.
Oh, like as in the first 2 years of our marriage. Great.
Yep, sorry. But hey, you'll do just fine, I'm sure. I know how well you like to entertain yourself.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how much you like to read, watch old movies, exercise,
Yeah.
spending the whole month alone while I'm on night float, and...
Kevin J. Schultz. What was that last one?
You mean that little part where I spend every night at the hospital for a month?
Yeah, and I spend every night by myself.
Look, it's only for 1 month. For both years, of course, so it's 2 months.
I
still.
am pretty sure you did not mention that one. I would have remembered it. Kevin, when do we get to spend the time we need?
I don't know. I'm not sure when doctors get the free time. You know, I was with my attending in surgery till midnight last night. And that guy, he has got to be pushing 70.
And you think his wife's still waiting on him?
They've got to have it figured out by now. Listen, I may not have a lot of free time, but I promise, when we're together, when I'm with you, it's going to be quality time.
Right. My friend Sarah told me that quality time was just a joke. Her dad used to use that line on her just so he'd have to spend 10 minutes of quality time with her.
Honey, that's insane. I mean, come on. Really? Just 10 minutes?
Yeah.
Listen, right off the bat, I'm going to be able to double that.
Did you say double that? Kevin, you are going to take the entire day off for our wedding, aren't you? Kevin? Kevin!
Honey, the senior resident just paged me. There's an emergency CHIS going on right now. I need more of those for my stats, okay? I got to go, I'm sorry. But look, they only take 4 hours, okay? 5 tops, but I promise. After that, it's me and you. Quality time.
What's the best thing your family ever did? In your growing up years, your family of origin, or maybe your current family, or maybe your in-laws. What's the best thing they've ever done? Gary Smalley says one of the activities that many happy families have in common is the activity of camping. Camping, he says, brings people together. They have a wonderful time, a wonderful experience. It's the best thing some families do together, which worries me. Because neither my family of origin nor our current family has ever done much by the way of camping. Well, there was that one time. That time when we lived in the city of Guadalajara, Mexico, and my brother John and I decided we're going camping. Now, we didn't have much by way of gear, but we got together what we had, got the clothing, got the food, got the backpacks. We didn't have a tent, so we took hammocks. We thought, we'll sleep in hammocks. That way we'll be up off the ground, away from the slimy snakes and the crispy critters. We'll be in great shape. Now, what we hadn't taken into account was that Guadalajara, being at about 5,000 feet elevation, is cold at night. Have you ever slept in a hammock? Unless you have some kind of insane death wish, don't do it, especially not in cold weather. It is freezing cold. The cold comes at you from every which direction. Now, on top of it, it just happened that that night it rained. Now, when I say it rained, that's like saying that this winter in Southern California, we've had a few sprinkles. I mean, it came down in buckets. It wasn't long before that hammock was not only cold from every which direction, wet in every place, but was starting to fill up with water. I was sloshing around that hammock in utter misery. I spent a year in that hammock that night. My brother finally decided he'd had enough of that, got out of his hammock and decided it was better just to stand under the branches in the rain than it was to lie in that hammock. After that one experience, you may understand why I am only really interested in camping if it includes the word Hyatt. So when I read from Smalley, camping, one of the great things families do together, I think, uh-oh, we could be in trouble. But maybe that's it for you. Maybe that's the greatest thing your family did together in your growing up, or maybe still does. Or maybe it's something else. Our family did do something in the out of doors, and we did it regularly. It wasn't involving spending the night, but it was hiking. We would go out on hikes, and we did this a lot, and we had a wonderful time. I can still remember those Sabbath afternoons when Mom and Dad would gather the kids together and the Roberts brood would head off into the woods or the mountains around where we lived. We had some marvelous Sabbath afternoons. We would end up finding a river or a creek nearby, and we would climb out onto the big boulders in the creek. We would sit down in the sun, and my dad would begin to tell stories. There was one story he told us. It was a continuing family saga. He called it The Scene. The Scene was the fictionalized future of the Roberts siblings. The Scene always involved two realities. One, it always involved service of some kind, that we would grow up to serve other people. But the second thing it always involved was excitement, adventure. And my dad was a great storyteller. And so as we would sit around the rushing water and he would tell the story, it would always build towards some cataclysmic event. I can still remember it now. He would say, and the Roberts kids would press back up against the wall, trying to disappear into the shadows, the hair on the back of their necks standing up. And they waited. And then suddenly, around the corner, came the biggest, the ugliest, the meanest. And we'll continue from there next week. And we would say, Dad, no, please. What was it, Dad? No, we'll continue next week. Daddy, please. Jesus wouldn't do that to children, Daddy. But the next week, we would pick up the scene again. As an adult, as I look back on those childhood stories, I think that in many ways, my life was formed by the scene. One of the great things our family ever did. What's the greatest thing your family has ever done? We do something, our little family now, we've had a harder time doing it as our kids have gotten older, but we still manage to do it, though not as regularly as we wish. It's called family night. A night when we come together to eat together, to play together, and to pray together. And we always have games that we sit at tables and we play. Have you ever heard the term board games? Are you familiar with that term? Table games in an era of computers? Oh, we've had some favorites over the years. For a while, the favorite game was Monopoly. We played Monopoly and we played Monopoly. I think my children got tired of their father winning and winning and winning. Currently, our favorite game is Racco. You remember that game? It's a great game. We listen to music, we play, we talk. It's a wonderful experience. So let me ask you, what's the best thing you do as a family? What's the best thing you did growing up? Now, while you're pondering that, I want to take you to a passage of Scripture in the book of Psalms. It's the 90th Psalm. Psalm 90, if you're reaching for a pew Bible, is page 890. Psalm 90, it has the byline, the prayer of Moses, the man of God. If that byline is correct, and we have no reason to question it, then this would be the oldest psalm in the entire hymn book of Israel, written by Moses. As you read the psalm, you come to the conclusion that the people and their leader are struggling with something difficult. There is something challenging that is going on in their lives. If indeed that is the case, then it is probably that wilderness wandering journey from Egypt to Canaan. It is probably in that context that this was penned. Now, in this psalm, we will run into some imagery that is rich, some terms that are vivid. We will come across some statements that will resonate with you and that you will remember. But before we begin to read, I want to tell you what the essence of the message of the psalm is. It is simply this, that God is great, God is grand, God is eternal, and human beings, by comparison, are finite and frail and temporal. That's the theme. So let's read just a few verses of the psalm. We'll begin in Psalm 90, verse 1. This is what the psalmist writes. Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations. Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn people back to dust, saying, return to dust, you mortals. 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. You get the message, don't you? God is grand and glorious and eternal and magnificent. And against that backdrop, when you stand human beings in front of that, it appears that human beings are but dust on the pages of history. A little wind, and they dissipate and disappear. Limited. Finite. In fact, go to verse 10, because verse 10 will state the same thing in another way. Notice what he says there. Our days may come to 70 years, or 80 if strength endures. Yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass, and we fly away. 70 years, he says. Or possibly, if your strength endures, 80. Now, there appears to have been a line lost, maybe by some of the copyists, some of the translators, somewhere buried deep in history. There was another line that the original writer intended to add, and it was this, or 90 or 100 if you live in the blue zones. It's been lost in history. But his point is simply to say, even at the very best, even if our strength endures and we stretch out the decades of our life as far as possible, stand that up against the eternal God, and you will realize it is but a wisp of smoke that dissipates and disappears into the air. That's what the psalmist is saying. And yet, God is eternal. Now, having noted the eternal nature of God and the temporal nature of human beings, he then turns to prayer. He makes some petitions of God in a context like that. It is one of those petitions that reaches out and grabs me. One of those petitions that says, pay attention to this. It is a petition over which we human beings and we families would do well to linger. One of the petition among many. That's what I would like you to ponder. Psalm 90, verse 12. He says, teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom. What is he saying? Well, it may be helpful to reread that same verse, only this time in the contemporary English version. This is how the contemporary English version renders the verse. It says, teach us to wisely use all the time we have. Teach us to wisely use all the time we have. Teach us to number our days that we may gain a heart of wisdom. In other words, God, we know you are eternal, but we know we are temporal. We have only a limited time. Since we have a limited time, help us to wisely estimate and understand the time we have, and then to make the very best, the very wisest choices about how to use that time. It's a petition upon which we could all do well to linger, but in particular, maybe it is one that we families ought to take account of. Remember our question? What is the best thing? Best thing your family ever did? Best thing your family does? I want to ask you that question about today and the days to come. What is the best thing you can do for your family? People will answer that question in different ways. One family might say the very best thing that we can do for our family is to make certain that our children get a very solid, a very good education, give them a great start in life. Others will say the very best thing we can do for our family is to teach our children the value of money, the meaning of a dollar. It will give them a great start in life. Others will say the very best thing we can do for our family is to teach us all to be servants, to get involved in service projects. All of those are noble answers. I would have no argument with them, and I doubt you would either. But others would answer it differently. What's the best thing we could do? It might be to camp together, or to eat together, or to play together, or to pray together, or to serve together, or to worship together. Many different possibilities. Do you know what I would say? I would say in that last list, pray and eat and worship and all the others, maybe if you take not the first word, but the second one, maybe you will find contained in that the very best thing you can do for your family. Pray together, eat together, play together. Because when it comes to relationships, especially family relationships, together is spelled T-I-M-E. Time. Could it be that maybe the very best thing you could do for your family is to give them the gift of your time? Maybe that can be contained in what Moses said so many centuries ago. Teach us to use wisely all the time that we have. Our children, Austin and Miranda, will tell you. They will tell you their mother's answer to the question. I will tell you the same thing because we have all heard it many times. Maybe it's her birthday that is rolling around, or maybe it's the holiday season. Christmas is coming. And so they go up to Mom and they say, Mommy, what is the best thing we could do for you? Mommy, what's the Christmas gift you want? Mommy, what can we buy you for your birthday? Time and again, Anita's response is this: the best gift you could give me is a gift that doesn't cost anything. I just want time. To play together, to eat together, to serve together, to worship together. Just give me time where we can all be together as family. It could be that Anita is on to something critically important. In fact, not too many minutes ago, we read the responsive scripture reading. The responsive scripture that comes from the ancient wise man in the book of Ecclesiastes. Words and phrases with which you are very familiar. But the question is, do you believe them? Do you remember how it began? There is a time for every activity under heaven. A season for every activity under the sun. Do you believe that? Maybe you will say, well, he's talking about certain generalized activities. There are seasons for those things, planting and tearing down and building and destroying. Yes, he is, but he is also addressing time. There is a time for every activity under heaven. Do you remember the old organizational mantra? If you're trying to somehow bring order out of a chaotic life, You want to have more organization in your workspace or your living space. Do you remember that old mantra? A place for everything, and everything, what? In its place. I wonder if that mantra applies equally well with time. A time for everything, and everything in its time. Now, maybe you will say to me exactly what I think about my life. Wait a minute. It's chaotic. So many times it's out of control. So many demands. I simply cannot keep everything contained in the time where I wish it would be contained. It's legitimate. That's life. But have you ever seen the bumper sticker that says, life is what happens while we're making plans? And so we plan and we scheme and we say, but all the time the clock is inexorably ticking. Time is moving forward. I can remember when our kids were 2 and 5 or 3 and 6 or 4 and 7. I can remember we would be visiting with friends after church. The kids would be running around on the lawn. They would be playing. They would have a great time. And we would finally try to corral them and gather them up to head home. And a family or a couple or a person would walk by who was a little bit further down the road of life than we were. And they would pause. And they would watch what was happening. And then they would say something that scared me. They would say, treasure these moments because they pass far too quickly. That used to scare me. I thought, I'm trying to treasure them. They're not going by that fast. But do you know what? Our kids are now 17 and 14. And Mom's Network happens on Wednesday mornings here at the church. And I watch those moms come with their precious little ones. I look at them and I think, ours were never that small. And then I walk by a mom and I say to her, treasure these moments, for they pass far too quickly. It reminds me of those words that were sung. Do you remember them? Sung by Teve and Golde and Fiddler on the Roof. Is this the little girl I carried? Is this the little boy at play? I don't remember growing older. When did they? When did she get to be a beauty? When did he grow to be so tall? Wasn't it yesterday when they were small? Sunrise, sunset, swiftly flow the days. Seedlings turn overnight to sunflowers, blossoming even as we gaze. Sunrise, sunset, swiftly fly the years, one season following another, laden with happiness and tears. It moves so quickly. In the midst of a modern life where we run pell-mell here, there, and everywhere, suddenly steps an ancient man from a time gone by, and from his dusty journey through the desert, he has an amazingly timely message for the modern world. It is a petition that he offers up in prayer to God when he says, teach us to number our days, that we might apply our hearts to wisdom. Teach us to use our time wisely and well. It could be that gift of time just may be the very best gift that you can give to your family. It may be the hardest gift, but may be the best gift. Now, some of us will say, well, I don't have a lot of time, but what time I have will be quality time. I'll give you quality time. Have you ever spoken those words? Quality time. May I read to you from 2 different pieces. The first, a piece from Newsweek magazine. It's been some years ago now, dated May 12, 1997. Listen to these words. Quality time arrived on the scene, it says, in the early 70s, featured in a wave of research, including a now famous study by Allison Clark Stewart of the University of California, Irvine. She found, and recent brain research backs her up, that the more actively mothers were involved with their babies, talking and cooing and so forth, the better it was for the baby's cognitive and social development. Babies who spent time with their mothers but didn't get as much of the goo-gooing and eye contact did less well. Clark Stewart said, but to be able to have that high quality time, you have to invest a certain amount of pure time. She continued, it's not just 10 minutes a week. Close quote on her. Continue with the Newsweek piece. Such nuances quickly dropped away as baby boomer couples found quality time an immense help in juggling 2 careers and a potty chair. Today, it's not even clear what most people mean when they use the term quality time. Is it playing patty cake? Is that higher quality activity than driving to ballet lessons? Does family dinner count if the TV is on? Maybe if it's turned down and is soft? All we reliably know is that whenever time with kids is in short supply, calling it quality time makes us parents feel better. I hope that I'm not the only guilty party. Have you ever said to yourself, well, it may only have been 5 minutes, but it was quality time. We may only get 10 minutes in the next 48 hours, but it will be quality time. Have you ever said that, father, mother? Or consider the words of Dr. Robert Evans, psychologist and director of Human Relations Service in Wellesley, Massachusetts. He writes this, one of the great myths of parenting is quality time. The idea that child rearing can be handled in short doses of positive interaction. We may be too busy to spend much time with our children, so this theory goes, but it's all right if that time is full of high quality contact. Unfortunately, says Evans, this rarely works in good part because children by their very nature provoke large quantities of low quality time. Have you discovered that? I learned this lesson, he says, the hard way. Years ago, back when the Celtics were still a powerhouse, I kept hearing that I was the only father who never took his children to a Celtics game. One Wednesday, when I was offered 4 tickets, I bought them despite the cost, and even though the game was on a school night and my younger son was in the 3rd grade, we went. The tickets turned out to be available because the opponents were terrible. The Celtics blew them out, and with 4 minutes left to play, I was ready to join the fans who were leaving. But my son demanded that we stay all the way to the end. We ended up with me dragging him away as he clutched the railing in front of him. When we got home at 10 p.m., I said, bedtime. He said, I'm hungry. Listen, I told him, we ate before we left. You had 2 big pretzels and a hot dog. It's 10 on a school night upstairs. He looked at me and said, and I've never forgotten this, you never do what I want to do. Evans says, I think I learned several lessons. The first is that our kids won't let us have just quality time only. Their needs and wishes, their natural self-centeredness make this impossible. To expect otherwise is to invite frustration and guilt. Trying to force our children, please hear this, trying to force our children onto a diet of brief, high-quality time can only strip the naturalness right out of our communication. And then he says, imagine this, imagine, he says, that I asked you to sit down right now and have a high-quality conversation with your spouse. Right now, do it. 10 minutes, sit down, high-quality conversation. The demand is disabling. We can only have high-quality time together if we have enough total time so that we can tolerate the inevitably low-quality moments. Do you understand, Evans? High-quality time is wonderful, but it cannot be forced to happen. It happens in those many times of low-quality experiences. As I look back over my life as a parent, I realize that some of the most wonderful moments, some of the most memorable times, some of the deepest bonding happen at the most unexpected places and times. Times that were unplanned. Times when somehow we had the wherewithal to choose to spend them together. And suddenly, along the way, serendipitously, a moment of such high quality that I remember it years later emerged. I wish I could control those times. I wish I could somehow schedule them in my iPod Touch, say, this is the high quality moment, and that's the one, because here I've got that, and there I've got the other. But I've discovered, much to my chagrin at times, they refuse to be scheduled. Maybe that's why I resonate so much with Psalm 90, with the understanding of a magnificent God who is eternal and who has all the world in His control, but those human beings who are temporal and who only have a limited amount of time, and therefore the man who wrote it, praise God. Teach us to number our days. Teach us how to use our time wisely and well. He didn't say it, but I will. Especially in our families. What is the best thing you have done? What is the best thing you could do for your family? Is it camping together, hiking together, playing together, worshiping together, working together, eating together? Yes, 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 and yes. If you include that word together, that word that in relationships, especially family relationships, is spelled T-I-M-E. It just could be the very best gift you will ever give your family. You know, as I reflected on these words, teach us to number our days, it struck me that as Seventh-day Adventist Christians, we have woven into the warp and woof of our lives something that ought to give us a prime opportunity to fall in line with this petition. It is a 24-hour period called Sabbath. A time when we are invited to pull away from the workaday world, to step aside from all of the pell-mell busyness that consumes us, to set aside the clock, to turn off the television, to not worry about the bills, to worship God, and to sit down and connect with those people that mean so much in our lives. When the many different groups came onto campus to study what it was that created a blue zone in Loma Linda, California, I had the wonderful opportunity to be interviewed by several of them. And I found something interesting that connected those interviews together. And it was this. When we would come to the topic of Sabbath and to commentary about Sabbath, they would often say, now wait a minute, let me get this straight. Are you saying that for 24 hours, you turn off the television, you don't mow the lawn, you don't do your work in ordinary ways, and you go to church and you spend time with family? Are you telling me that? I said, that's the idea. And I still remember, time and again, people shaking their heads and saying, wow, that is just unbelievable. Do you know how my life would be different if I did that? And yet you have it. It's your life. It's what you live. Why not take that opportunity to be the very first step in giving a gift of time to your family? A gift on this day that is a day of rest and gladness, a day of peace and joy. A day when you may not answer the phone, when you don't worry about the bills that press in upon you, when you set the other work aside. And you open your life to God and give Him the gift of your time. and you open your life to a spouse, to some children, to some parents, to some siblings, and you say to them, today is about God and about us. What is the very best gift you could give to your family? Don't let the hours of this day pass before you take inventory in your life and then look at your family and say, I want to give you the gift of time.